Bigger is always better. It's the never-ending quest of one-upsmanship, and which city has the bigger one? We're talking skyscrapers here. Architects who think up these megastructures like the Burj Khalifa in Dubai and the Shanghai Tower in China and the Freedom Tower in New York City may have their heads up in the clouds. But now they're looking up into the sky as an untapped source of valuable real estate. So, what's the deal with this insane space skyscraper plan? There's only a finite amount of space in a major city, and it's a delicate balancing act between getting the best bang for your buck by cramming people into tall buildings and maximizing square footage, and not making the city a sea of skyscrapers that block the sun so much that the sidewalk effectively gets only 3 hours of true light a day. New York design firm's Cloud Architecture office has the answer though, and is the same company responsible for the 3D printed house on Mars and floating balloon city idea. Why build up when you can build down? Why should height be a limiting factor, like it is with ground-based construction? Extreme height, seclusion, and constant mobility. The project is called the Analema Tower, and it's so crazy that it might just work. The plan. In a nutshell, the Analema Tower will hang down from the sky like a pendulum on a grandfather clock. It will hover majestically above the ground, unhindered by the anchors tethering it to the Earth, able to swing freely from orbit as it drifts around the world. It's not made up either, even if it does sound like some far-fetched, harebrained scheme from a fictional plot straight out of a sci-fi movie. When you think about it, it's an elegant and thinking outside-the-box solution to a problem that seems to plague every densely populated city. The building will be adhered to a big old hunk of rock located in an Earth-bound orbit by a system of high-strength cables that will provide enough flexibility along the incredibly long structure to account for movement associated with wind and differing pressure gradients up through the various layers of atmosphere. The what? It's unsure if this will be classed as the world's tallest skyscraper or the world's longest. We're guessing it's just a matter of perspective. Analema Tower will start 31,068 miles above the Earth's surface, with a captured comet providing the foundation for the futuristic and overambitious project. The skyscraper is so long, in fact, that daytime will be 45 minutes longer at the top compared to the bottom due to the curvature of the Earth. The sun would set for the bottom residents well before it does for the upper levels. It would be set up in layers and sections according to utility and purpose. For example, the segments closest to the ground would be reserved for things like shopping, entertainment, fine dining, and other luxury and commercial services. Moving up, office spaces. Imagine the productivity when every employee living in the Sky Tower gets an ever-changing and uninterrupted view of the Earth below. Heading up again, and you would encounter a garden and agricultural space, used both for rest, relaxation, and leisure, as well as contributing to some of the most unfathomable bioload needed to feed such an enormous number of people on a daily basis. Climbing ever higher, and finally, the residential space. This area will take up a full 2/3 of the total space in the whole hanging skyscraper. After a hard day working in the shopping precinct or in the office, and shopping at your favorite Parkland space on the way home, you can finally put your feet up and rest. After all, the best view comes from the hardest climb. The uppermost division would be reserved for places of religious worship and funerary services for the Analema Tower residents. At a certain point, there would be no balconies or outside areas. Eventually, the air would become too thin and the upper atmosphere too cold for humans to tolerate. Additionally, without the ozone layer to protect against ultraviolet radiation, skin would be horribly burnt. That's given the fact that you survive the vacuum of space and sub-zero temperatures without the aid of a protective spacesuit, like that worn by astronauts during a spacewalk. The how. The European Space Agency demonstrated what was possible when they showed they could successfully land on a spinning comet during the Rosetta mission. With this in mind, Cloud's Architecture office believes that we already have the current technology to capture and redirect a passing comet. NASA's also planning a mission to capture an asteroid and relocate it to a stable orbit around the Moon, a mission whose success will ultimately determine if the Analema Tower plan is viable. After procuring a comet base, the hanging tower will operate in an eccentric geosynchronous orbit. For those less astronomically inclined, it will hover in a figure-8 type pattern around the world to coincide with popular places and cities on the Earth. Conventional construction starts with laying a good foundation before building the skyscraper incrementally from the ground up. This is no different, except it will just be done upside down. The comet will be locked in a non-revolving orbit and may or may not have rocket booster assistance built into the rocky face in order to manipulate and adjust the orbit path as needed. What is for certain is that a large number of incredibly thick cables would need to be buried deep into the rock to allow for a strong enough base to hang a whole building off. They would then intertwine in progressive stages, eventually forming one immense girthy master cable that would serve as the spine for the entire project. Once the base is established, the prefabricated modular sections will then be attached and hung down, forming an ever-growing chain that reaches down towards the Earth from its comet foundation. The sections would be built and assembled on Earth before being hoisted up by some type of crane or lifting system, before they're slotted into the building's extendable core by way of the flexible cables. Windows would change in size, thickness, and composition to deal with the changing stresses and atmospheric pressures experienced with heading up to the edge of space. There are an altogether different set of challenges in terms of infrastructure within a floating skyscraper. Firstly, how to supply the residents and visitors with enough power to go about their daily lives. As it turns out, that's already been thought of. Solar panels in the form of immense fan-like rays would be in a state of constant charge as they receive sunlight up in space, away from the attenuating nature of lower and upper atmosphere. The next big one, water. This is to be collected in a variety of ways, from simple rainwater catchments to siphoning moisture out of surrounding clouds, and even an apparatus to collect the moisture that condenses on the tower itself as it rises higher through the atmosphere. The where. Building such a monumental structure in Dubai makes sense. They have a proven track record when building the tallest residential structures in the world, with the benefit of doing it for a fraction of the cost compared to somewhere like, say, the US. Super tall structures are typically 15 times cheaper per square foot to build in Dubai than they are in New York. More to the point, pre-constructed modules could be staggered out and built multiple places aligned with the figure-8 orbit, with construction potentially going 24/7 as the building makes its journey around the Earth every day. It will make its figure-8 journey every day, returning to the same point at the same time. Dubai, New York, and Havana are just some of the proposed highlights the route would encompass. The orbit would be slowed down so the structure can stay above main cities for a longer period each day. Those wanting to stay the day or night in a particular place would have to leave by way of parachute. So it may pay to start those skydiving lessons now, as they will pay dividends in the future when you want to visit downtown Manhattan. To put it into perspective, the comet would orbit at an altitude of 31,068 miles above the Earth, well and truly in space, with its cables extending down. In comparison, the International Space Station orbits at just the 253-mile mark. The very top of the tower would start at 20 miles up and finish just 1.5 miles from the ground. Huge isn't the word to describe it. The Who. It stands to reason that in order to recoup the mind-bogglingly high cost of construction, only the uber-rich would be able to afford to live aboard what is essentially a floating paradise. As time goes on, there are more and more billionaires making their way into the world, and if you have the money to pay your way and live in such an awesome and space-age place, why not?